Well, it's a kind of grievance competition. Your guest earlier just tried to engage in it. I don't know what hurt she believes she's had from slavery. All of this was addressed 2 centuries ago. Everything has consequences. All history has consequences and ramifications. But, if we were to play this fairly, we would at least look at all of the countries around the world that engaged in the slave trade who are simply not interested in any form of reparations. The Ottoman Empire, all the Arab countries who not just traded far more slaves than across the Atlantic, but castrated all the men so that there wouldn't be any more African slaves after them. They worked them to the bone. I see no interest across Africa in paying reparations for selling their brother and sister Africans into slavery or for working them to the bone to the present day. There is slavery across Africa today. In fact, there are more slaves in the world today than there were at the height of the transatlantic slave trade. So some of us are simply a bit bored of hearing people ripping at closed wounds and then crying about their hurt or their presumed hurt, because everybody could do this. 1 million Europeans were stolen by North Africans over the course of decades of the North African Barbary pirate slave trade. Where would you end if you did that? The answer is you couldn't end, because nobody is alive who has actually suffered the hurt, and nobody is alive who did the wrong.
Nobody is alive who suffered the hurt, and nobody is alive who did the wrong. That was perfectly put by Douglas Murray. But that would not stop leftists from trying to get a payday from the government. Because that is literally what it is. They are not after righting any wrongs or creating better outcomes for their community. They are only after money.
The great disappointment of the last 14 years has been that civil society has failed, that we can't do the things to the Islamists that we would do, as I referred to the neo-Nazis. We're just not, it seems we're not set up for it, or people don't have the guts and the balls for it. They just, they fear being called a name more than anything. And, the thing I've always said is, we'll win when an Islamist who is not breaking the law but is saying horrible and hateful things is treated in the same way that Nick Griffin is treated. That's when we'll win.
Isn't that the truth? The only way forward for Western civilization is to treat Islamists, even non-violent ones who merely say extremist things, the same way neo-Nazis are treated. It is illegal in most of Europe to even question the Holocaust. But at the same time, an imam can host a religious service where he calls for Sharia or attacks on blasphemers. This shouldn't be allowed to go on.
That they believe, for instance, that being a woman should be merely the first step in a wider mission to bring down capitalism. Now, I don't think most women are on board with that, and most women would be rather surprised to be utilized in this fashion. But that is very clearly and explicitly, and I quote the various scholars and writers who've been pushing this for years, this is explicitly the aim. It's a basis for madness.
When people call the woke mob communists, they aren't slandering them. They are merely taking them at their word. The end point of their activism, via their own stated goals, is to destroy capitalism. Every position they support is only accepted because of its subversive nature. The good thing is that the majority of us will never stand for it.
I imagine that if the motion we had here tonight was Christianity is a religion of peace, we get to the Q&A, perhaps even before, and somebody would say, if the other side were arguing for that, somebody would say, what about the Crusades? What about that? And then there'd be some other clever clogs who'd say, what about that Florida pastor the other week? That was a nasty business. That's Christianity for you. If we'd had tonight, Judaism is a religion of peace, the other side were trying to argue that. Sure as anything. There'd be people popping up in the hall tonight saying, oh, there's this bit in one of the Old Testament books, really, really bad. All sorts of massacres going on. Why don't you talk about that? There might even be people trying to say that, the argument that Judaism was a religion of peace couldn't be argued because people would say, look at what Israel is doing, and isn't that a direct response, and so on. So let's not have a debate about Islam and whether or not Islam is a religion of peace without talking about the facts to do with Islam. It's an absurd situation we're in, where nothing that anyone does whilst being Muslim is any responsibility of Islam.
Absolutely correct here again. We are deluded into this insane idea that absolutely nothing extremist Muslims do in the name of Islam is the fault of Islam. But that cannot be true, as no one would use that argument for other religions. If Islam leads people to blow themselves and others up, it cannot be a religion of peace.
Yasmin says about, we must show, as it were, our principles. We must show that we're better than them. We are better than Al-Qaeda. We don't have to show that, Yasmin.
No, you do.
Hang on. Yasmin, just wait a second. But the point is what Yasmin is doing, and what many people are doing at the moment, is holding America and our allies to such a uniquely high standard that no society could ever live up to it. That even the worst enemy of a society has to be buried according to the customs that they would want. I can't raise it in me, Yasmin, to think that whether or not the customs around his burial were perfect in your eyes is the most important thing in the Bin Laden story.
It sounds crazy now, but after the death of bin Laden, a lot of leftists wondered why the rule of law was not followed in his execution. They wanted him brought back to the US and wanted his body buried according to Islamic traditions. Douglas Murray's position was elegant and simple. We don't actually have to respect the rights of Osama bin Laden because he forfeited them years ago.
The madness is created, apart from anything else, by people believing that justice, equality, and equity can be attained by doubling down and focusing for the rest of our lives on people's immutable character traits. That is, instead of getting past issues like race, sex, sexuality, instead of making these things rather boring, passé, as uninteresting as talking about hair color, that in fact what we should be doing for the future of all of our lives is to obsessively talk and focus on race, sexuality, sex, gender, and that we should judge people accordingly.
This may sound cliché, but the point here is simple. The left actually loves being racist. This isn't reverse racism or anything like that. It is just plain old racism. They love to judge people by their immutable characteristics, and when they complain about the right doing it, they are just projecting. We must call them out.
That's going on here, and I don't know if did you watch the recent podcast? What's his name? Tucker Carlson did with what's his name? It's a very, very good podcast. Can you zoom in to see what his name is, Rob? Did you watch his show between the two of them?
Oh yeah, this is this historian no one's heard of.
Yeah, this is the historian you're saying that no one's heard of. And if this is the clip, Rob, matter of fact, just play this clip. Is this the one where he says...
Douglas Murray is absolutely right again. Western nations must adopt a migration system that benefits the host nation, not just the migrant. Today, they have a system that benefits the migrant alone. That must come to an end.
Yes, Kamala is following in some very noble footsteps here, of course. Hillary Clinton was a great purveyor of different accents depending on the part of America she was in. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, of course, congresswoman, Democrat congresswoman, is also a fine one for if she's speaking to, for instance, a majority black church, she will go into a special register and put on an entirely new voice. So Kamala is doing something that's tried and tested. But you're right, Rita, it does not look authentic. It looks horribly pandering. It's just another example of the fact that America is trying to work out who this politician is, and they're not really getting an answer.
Douglas was one of the few public intellectuals who called Kamala Harris out early for her inauthenticity. He saw through the weird quips and brat vibes and revealed that everything seemed stage-managed from the get-go. The good thing is that other Americans saw that too and punished the Democratic Party at the ballot.
I'd argue that Europe has done not too badly, considering the circumstances. In the middle of the last century, there was an almost negligible Muslim presence in Europe. At the turn of the 21st, in Western Europe alone, there were 15 to 17 million Muslims. That's a very fast migration, ladies and gentlemen, one of the fastest in human history. And no society would find it easy to deal with that kind of migration. As it happens, European societies, Western European societies have, I think, dealt with this much better than some would. Certainly, Muslims coming to live in Britain and in Western Europe enjoy more rights and better rights, among them freedom of worship, than they do in any Islamic country in the earth here today.
While leftists are content to scream at the West for not taking in enough immigrants, the facts show a different picture. Europe, for instance, has taken in more than enough and has treated Muslim migrants admirably. Unfortunately, a breaking point is near, and it would do everyone a lot of good if that breaking point is never reached.
It's always the countries that people want to come to who are put through this struggle session. Britain, like America and France, are the most desired destinations for migrants worldwide and have been for centuries. Why is that? It's not because we're racist, it's because we're better. It's because we're good. It's because when we see racism, we actually call it out and recognize it as a sin. Try finding that across Africa. Try finding that across the Middle East or in China. Nobody would hear. So what we have is a situation where the more virtuous countries are presented as the worst countries. It's sick, and most of us are tired of it.
That is the gospel truth. It is a really sick perspective to have, and most of us are tired of it. If you enjoy listening to Douglas Murray, don't forget to smash the like and subscribe buttons. Goodbye, and see you on the next one.